Welcome everyone to another episode of Pop Rant Radio, the podcast where two pop culture junkies discuss popular and sometimes not so popular culture. My name is Moss, and with me, as always, is I didn't say I was the host.
As always.
And with me, as always, is my good friend and co-host, Eric. How are you today, sir?
Doing great.
Good. You want to know how I'm doing?
Nope.
I'm fucking up
Adaptations,
the intro.
how are they?
So today we're going to talk about adaptations. Adaptations from one medium to another. So from comics to movies, or books to movies,
We're not doing comics to movies.
We're not.
No.
Well, I'm kind of doing it with the thing with Batman.
Now you've ruined it.
Well, I'll cut this part out.
Good.
It's okay. So adaptations, taking something from one medium and adapting it into another medium, and hopefully not making it suck.
Like the TV show Medium.
That I've never watched.
I just remember it had a blonde person in it. I believe it was a woman.
I believe you're correct. I remember that much. She had short hair.
Yep, it's not Jennifer Love Hewitt, because that's Ghost Whisperer.
I don't think she's a blonde in that show.
No, she's a brunette. She's got a ponytail.
Oh.
Like
Well, then
in
where
3
is
episodes.
the comparison?
Because they're both ghost shows.
Oh.
Just one was like, Medium was like, the ghosts were like weird and murderous, and like Ghost Whisperer was like, they're happy ghosts. Like this one's a little kid who drowned.
Like Casper?
Not like Casper. Casper's creepy and is a molester. Can I keep you?
That is creepy as hell.
It is.
Alright, so adaptations.
You know, people are gonna fucking love the fact that we just talk about random fucking TV shows that no one remembers.
Of course. That's the whole idea.
So first off, I want to talk about something that a lot of people are very opinionated on, and that is the manga to cartoon to movie adaptation of The Last Airbender, or Avatar: The Last Airbender. I think they dropped Avatar because of the James Cameron film.
Right, yeah, it was totally copyright issues.
Don't drop it. The movie was shit. 2's gonna be shit. 3's gonna be shit.
You heard it here, James Cameron.
Yeah, James Cameron, stop. Go back to the ocean. Go find more fish. That's your job now. Just cut in that James Cameron song.
His name is James Cameron, the bravest pioneer. No budget too steep, no sea too deep. Who's that? It's him, James Cameron.
We'll just play it on loop for the next 20 minutes.
Alright, I'll find it.
But no, so Avatar: The Last Airbender came out when I was in like middle school, I think, when that came out. And I remember even as like a kid, I really, really liked it.
The show?
Yeah. And it does mature, which is really cool. Like, it starts out kind of goofy and, you know, it's got kind of morals and stuff like that. But then, like, season 2 picks up and it gets really, like, dark and, like, a lot of, like, weight is revealed on the main character.
Right, as the characters get older and mature, like,
Right.
the show
And, like,
matures with it.
It's leading up to a point where, you know, it hits the fan and it starts to really weigh down on our characters, and it's really, really well. So, for those 5 of you that don't know what Avatar: The Last Airbender is, it is a story that takes place in this world where there are people, and then there are people that
There are people?
There are people. There's also animals, and there's also water.
Oh.
It's amazing.
No plants, though.
No plants. Fuck trees. So...
Only on Arbor Day. That's the only time they count.
So, on this version of, I guess, Earth, I don't know if it's Earth,
and it's kind of like medieval, like Shaolin.
It would be set kind of like in the...
Like feudal Japan, feudal China.
Very much so. And there are kind of 4 different nations, and they're all separated by different land masses. And the 4 nations are the 4 elements: fire, water, earth, and air. The story is that all the nations worked in peace. They were all happy. But then the Avatar, which is a celestial type being,
It's like legendary figure,
right? Who like shows up once per generation, like whenever the next one dies, another one is born, kind of deal. Who can control all 4, and he or she is supposed to bring balance to the 4
Force.
elements. The Force.
You were the chosen one.
I wish it was Hayden Christensen. From my point of view, you're wrong.
Fire Nation.
Fire Nation. Yup.
He's not a fan of fire. He
No.
did get melted by lava.
Yep. And I kind of wish Obi-Wan would just pushed him a little bit.
Just
A little bit further down.
force pushed him into the lava.
4,
Boy,
5, and 6 won't happen.
boy, did I bet on the wrong horse. Thank you, nostalgia critic. So
kind of
so the Avatar will come and be able to
Bring
control
balance to-
all four
yeah.
elements, because people in this universe can normally only control one element, the element from the
which
nation
is,
that they're
It's
from.
not really talked about too much. Like, there's no science behind it. Like, there's no reason why.
But it's established that is the order.
Right, that's the idea. So all of a sudden, there's no Avatar, and stuff kind of starts to wind down, and then out of nowhere, the Fire Nation gets really greedy because of their leader, and they move on and they start invading. And they wipe out the Air Nation. The Air Nation's gone. And at this point, like, it's, I think, over the course of, like, it's a long time. I don't want to say the years because I don't want to get yelled at.
Years.
Yeah, it's years. X years.
With an S.
Right. With an S and apostrophe. It might be 1 year.
It's possessive.
Oh, dang it. What are the parentheses? Grammar teachers.
It's fine. Brackets.
Brackets.
Brackets S.
Yeah.
In brackets.
Hyphens. All hyphens.
Ellipsis.
So we join these two kids in the Water Nation. Katara and Sokka, or Sokka, depending on who you talk to, who are two people in this water tribe, and they happen to stumble upon this giant frozen block of ice, which actually turns out to contain the Avatar, whose name is Aang. It's actually Aang, but, we'll get to that.
Language is tough.
Yes, so the main gist of the story is Aang is young. He doesn't know, he learns really quickly that he's kind of a fish out of water time-wise, but essentially what's happening is Aang needs to learn the four elements. He already has air mastered, but he needs to learn water, so they need to go to the opposite pole of the planet to learn from Katara's father on how to bend water, and that's going to be the first step. Then he's got to go learn earth, then fire, then he's going to go take down the Fire Lord, who is a total dick. And the whole time they're being chased by the Fire Lord's son, Prince Zuko, who is, in my opinion, he was always kind of my favorite character. He's very troubled. He's kicked out from his father's group because he doesn't do a very good job as a soldier. His father gets really pissed off, injures him, and so he's got this big, horrible scar on his face, and his whole goal is, I'm going to capture the Avatar with the help of my uncle, bring him to my father, I'm going to be welcomed back,
Gotcha.
I'll be heralded as, the prince again.
He's outcasted, then he's going to bring the Avatar, which is now the enemy of the Fire Nation, to the Fire Nation, to his father, and everything would be forgiven.
The great thing is he goes through so many changes as a character. There's parts where he helps Aang, then he doesn't, then he hurts Aang, then he goes after him, then he helps him again. It's this big dynamic character.
He has an arc.
Right, and it's great. It's wonderful. And everyone kind of has an arc. Everyone learns their place. Everyone
learns their place.
Everyone does what they're supposed to do.
Right. They develop their own roles, and they develop as three-dimensional people.
Right, and it's really, really good. Well, then
then they made a movie.
Then wonderful...
Specifically, M. Night Shyamalan made a movie.
Everyone's favorite director, M. Night Shyamalan, was like, I'm going to make this wonderful thing into a great movie. And everyone was like, no, please? And he said, no, I'm going to do it. And then he immediately released this public statement that just, I've never known a movie was going to be garbage immediately this fast. He comes out with this statement about how he's changing the pronunciation of the names to what they would be realistically. Aang is now Aang. Sokka is now Sokka, and other crap like that. He's going to nerf the Fire Nation by giving them Nerf guns. No, they can't. They can't manipulate fire. They can't create fire. They can only manipulate it. So they have to have a source to pull it from.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, Shyamalan subscribes to the idea that it is Nerf or nothing.
Right. God damn it. Fuck. So the movie is widely hated.
Yeah.
And rightfully so.
Did we see this together?
I don't know. I don't know if we did.
Okay.
I saw I think my girlfriend.
Okay.
And we both liked it, but I think the reason why I liked it is because before it we saw The Predator, the remake with Adrian Brody.
Oh, Predators.
Whatever.
Yeah, that wasn't very good either.
Shits.
Yeah.
You can call it that.
I guess then I saw this with, I remember. Okay, I saw it with two friends, and it was tough to get through.
Yeah, it really is. There's a lot of parts that are just really dumb. I know the Nostalgia Critic has done a huge review on it. If you want to go more in depth on it, definitely check out his review. It's very good. There's just a lot of almost disrespect to the show.
Yeah, and I haven't watched the show, and you can probably speak to this more than I can, but I know one of the big controversies surrounding this movie, on top of the fact that just, like, the special effects are terrible,
Yeah.
and the acting is terrible, which I'll talk more about that, but I know one of the big things is, like, the Earth Nation are really depowered in the movie in comparison to how they're represented in the show.
Yeah, like, they're, like, pulling up mountains in the show, and,
Right.
like, pulling up giant blocks and skating uphill with them.
Right, and in the movie, it's like, it takes five
like
dudes
10
to
guys.
levitate, like, one pebble.
And they do, like, a whole, like, dance routine, and it feels like a joke. It would be something the Wayans brothers would do, not in the film adaptation of the series.
Yeah, when you're watching the movie, you're like, well, no wonder these guys got captured, because they can't do anything.
Right, they suck in this movie.
Right, and it's like, the logic of it is really bad, because they're talking about how all you Earth Nation people who can control the element of Earth, you're in this quarry, and you can't do anything.
Right, you're stuck.
Because I think
it's only if there was Earth around us.
Right, because I think in the show, everything happens like on a...
It happens on a boat.
Right.
It's on a steel boat.
So it makes sense that there's no Earth around for them to manipulate.
Right.
But so another thing, like I was talking about earlier, the acting in this movie,
the acting's bad, and
I mean,
from a filmmaking perspective, the camera work is bad.
Yeah, the cinematography. So
the cinematography is very much shot reverse shot.
Right. The entire movie is character A shot, character B shot,
Only when
character
they're
A
talking.
shot, character B shot. It's there's so much exposition. It's all about telling and not showing, which is a huge sin that a movie can commit. Film is a visual medium.
Yeah, show us, don't tell us.
Right.
And I know a lot of people would argue, well, they've got a lot of stuff to get through. If they're going to do the entire book of water in this one movie, then don't do it. Because and they also they like pick like 3 or 4 episodes that they put into the movie. Like there's an episode where Aang gets captured by the Fire Nation, and he's helped by this random masked character who like helps him escape, and like it's this big scene, right? And we don't learn until later on the masked character is Zuko. You know, it's a really kind of cool reveal, and it kind of makes you question, well, why would he help? But then you kind of realize, oh, well, he helped because this was a random Fire Nation group capturing Aang. He needs Aang to get back into the Fire Nation. So he sabotages his own people to take credit for it eventually.
There's this like context and subtlety to what's happening, and in the movie they try to do that in a scene, but all the subtlety and the context is just completely removed.
It's really, really bad.
Right. So, I mean, this movie, everyone agrees this movie is absolutely terrible because it fails on so many levels. Like, it fails as adaptation, but it also fails just on cinematography and acting and screenplay and special effects. Like, everything is
it's a bad movie, period.
It's a horrible production. Like, everything involved in the production is just bad. And the worst thing about it is it sacrifices... Yes, the penis hair. It sacrifices all of the things that really made the show interesting from what I've heard, because I haven't watched the show myself. Lots of people really, really love this show, and it seems like what they sacrificed is all of the things that made the show so compelling in the first place.
Yeah, there's a lot of intelligence and a lot of weight to the show.
Yeah, and the depth of the characters.
Yeah, like one of the best things that the show talks about is that with Aang trying to learn the 4 elements, he has a lot of trouble learning different ones besides air, but he also eventually finds out that there's this kind of this state where he's taken over by what's called the Avatar state. And it's usually only happens when he loses control, when something bad happens. Pretty much when Banner goes into the Hulk, Aang goes in the Avatar state.
Yeah, it's kind of like this idea of being in this like sublime state of mind.
Yeah, cut. Like it's cut from the movie.
Seems important.
It's super. There's one of the best scenes that kind of sold me on the show was the second episode. They get to the Air Kingdom. And Aang at this point doesn't know the Air Nation's wiped out, and he's like talking to them. He's like, "Oh, you gotta see this, and I gotta show you this, and the teacher's gotta show you this, and the flying lemurs and the bison. You gotta see all this cool stuff." And he like walks in this temple, and the temple's just destroyed, and like there's like a corpse laying next to a shrine, and he just like collapses to his knees, goes in the Avatar state, and just like shit gets bad.
Right, and it sounds like there's weight behind what's happening because you've established who this character is, where contrastly in the movie, like that same kind of thing happens, but it's 45 seconds after we've been introduced to his character. So his emotional reaction has no weight to the audience.
Yeah, because there's, especially in the show, there's no talk about the Air Nation being wiped out. So even us as an audience thinks he's going to get there and it's going to be fine. Now, Katara and Sokka, I believe they're aware that the Air Nation was attacked. I don't know if they know that it's completely wiped out. they're kind of more so skeptical when he's talking about how great it's going to be and all this,
Right.
and then it really builds up and it hits you. Show, great. Movie, they just get there and it's like, everyone's dead. Let's go to the Water Nation.
Well, that sucked.
Right. Oops. Well, I was 20 minutes off our
The script
map.
says we have to fly here now.
Yep. Ugh, it's terrible.
It's real rough. So the first adaptation that I want to talk about today is Minority Report. And Minority Report was originally a short story written by Philip K. Dick. And nice.
Yep.
So Minority Report is a short story, and it basically involves the idea that the police in the future have a division called the Pre-Crime Division. And there are 3, they call them precogs. They're like these beings that can essentially see the future.
Sure.
So they use these beings to predict crimes that are going to happen in the future, and they arrest people based on crimes that they haven't actually committed yet, but that the precogs envision that they will commit.
Okay, but do they use the 3 seashells?
They don't use the 3 seashells,
Okay.
except when they go to the bathroom.
Right.
So the story centers around the main character, whose name is John Atherton, I think. We'll go with that.
Yes.
And he is the head of the precog unit, like the police chief or whatever the title is. The whole idea is that the 3 precogs, they come up with a report of what's going to happen. And then in the short story, there's always what's called a minority report, which is 2 of the precogs agree about what's going to happen, and then one of the other precogs,
the last ones.
Yeah, they create the minority report, which is they have a differing opinion about what's going to happen.
So I'm guessing that's kind of like a less likely situation, usually considered.
You don't know. Like in this context of the story, you don't know really what it is until later. But basically, they always just go by whatever the majority, quote unquote, report is. That's what they act upon. So that's how they arrest people and that sort of thing. And in the short story, it's all crime is tracked this way. When we get to the movie's specifically just murder. One day, the precogs come up with the idea that the main character, John Atherton, he's going to kill this guy whose name he's never heard of. So he's thinking, like, how can I kill somebody who I've never even met or never even heard of before? So it's his journey to figure out, to get a hold of his minority report to figure out, okay, what's the alternative?
Right.
And anyway, he kind of goes on the run. He becomes a fugitive, and they're chasing him. And he ends up figuring out that the 3 precogs always come up with 3 different scenarios.
Okay.
And then the computer searches for the closest to and finds the similarities between them, and then gives the police that report, and that's what they've been acting on.
So there is no minority report.
Correct.
They're all minority reports.
Exactly. So the 3 precogs all have a different interpretation of the events, and the whole crux of the short story is that all 3 results are different enough, and the idea is that because John is reading all 3 of them are changing because he has knowledge of them.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So
the whole time changing kind of thing.
Yeah, and the whole theme behind the story is can you choose to change your fate? Can you?
If you're Lucina, you can challenge your fate.
Do you have free will essentially? So in the short story, he's faced with the decision. Okay, the guy he ends up supposedly going to kill is a general in the military that is trying to bring down the pre-crime program so he can install his own military force to take over the government. So the 3
RoboCop.
Right. Yeah. The 3 different stories, essentially the first one says, normal, you're going to kill this general. The second story says you're not going to kill this general because you have knowledge of the first and you choose not to. And then the third story says you are going to kill him.
You rebel against the second story and decide to kill him anyways.
Well, it's you're going to kill him because if you don't kill him, it proves that the precog program doesn't work.
Oh,
which gives him reason.
Do it,
exactly.
He's going to cause the uproar.
Right. So he decides, I'm going to do it in order to save the program. And then there's a little bit more to it, but that's the basis of the short story. So in the movie, it's the same kind of thing, the same setup. Tom Cruise plays the main character, John Atherton. He's the head of the pre-crime unit, and there's the 3 precogs again, but there's not always a minority report. Like, minority reports don't happen very often in this version of the story, and they're always discarded. Like, they're always ignored. So when the report comes up and it says, okay, John's going to kill this guy he's never heard of, he's thinking, okay, then there's definitely a minority report that I have to get a hold of. He has to go on the run because there's other people that see, like, oh, you're going to kill somebody, so we have to arrest you. So it's kind of this like thriller where he goes on the run. The police are chasing after him while he's trying to like figure out what's going on. And spoilers for both of these, I guess. In the movie, it turns out that him, like the result of him going to kill somebody is like this larger conspiracy behind the guy who originally created the precog program. Like, he committed a murder and he tampered with the system to cover up the fact that he committed it. So John ends up like solving this big conspiracy surrounding the guy who originally made the program. So at the end, he proves that the program doesn't work because it's been tampered with. So they kind of have 2 separate endings. I actually kind of think that the short story is a little more interesting because the character in it is not necessarily like the greatest guy ever.
Okay.
And in the movie, like, Tom Cruise is the main character, and in the movie there is a subplot that he has like a drug addiction and that he lost his son, and that's why he originally joined the precog program. But it's a Steven Spielberg directed movie, and so like it at the end it has a happy ending, right, essentially.
It's his classic kind of stamp.
Yeah, it's a Hollywood movie, and it's good. I like it, but it kind of just tells, again, the story goes A to B, and like at the end, the hero, wins and so on. And the book, or rather the short story, kind of has a more interesting ending because he kind of loses. Like, even though that he succeeds in keeping the pre-crime program around, he has to kill somebody to do it. Mm-hmm. So he kind of has to like sacrifice his own humanity to keep like the status quo or keep balance to the government, the world, the force. Yeah. Balance the force. The 4 Fire Nations.
Yeah. The 4 Fire Nations.
Well, after they take over.
Yeah.
So water. I think that the short story is a little more interesting on that front, but I still think that both are valid stories. Like, they're both good in their own way. But what's cool about it is, even though both stories go in 2 very different directions, they use the core concept of we can predict crimes before they happen, and they tell 2 interesting stories based upon that premise. So it's just kind of this example where you have this main concept, and even though the short story and the movie tell 2 totally separate stories, I think they're both good, even though they both go in 2 different directions. So the whole idea is that the adaptation doesn't necessarily have to be super faithful to the original source material.
To still tell a good story.
Yeah, as long as you're using it as a springboard to still tell a good story, like you said.
Right.
So I think that's a really good example of a good adaptation that's not necessarily super faithful to the source material.
So one of my favorite TV shows growing up that I used to watch every time before I go to school was Transformers Armada, which... it was Transformers, but it was kind of when they started to do their different series every like 5 or 6 years. They
right, because they did like
restart.
Yeah, they did like Beast Wars.
Right, and this was after Beast Wars, but like before some like the weird cyber ones.
Right, and this is obviously post like the '80s show, the original cartoon.
I did, however, go back and eventually watch that one as well as Beast Wars, but we're not going to talk about Beast Wars because no. Even though it's great.
Maximize! Terrorize!
The fucking pterodactyl. Terrorize!
Yes, that was very good.
So, I grew up with Transformers, and I loved it. They were like one of my favorite toys to get, and Armada was horrible with toys because there were the Transformers, and then there were the mini-cons.
Okay.
I
vaguely remember this.
Yeah, they were smaller Transformers that connected to the main Transformers, and they either unlocked something or they like became something. And then of course there were like the ones that would combine and become a sword, or the ones that would combine and become a gun, and it was like, yay, this is crazy cool.
People got to sell toys.
Oh yeah. But I loved it. And I watched when I was in high school, because it was kind of funny how late it was. I watched the 1980s Transformers movie in high school with White Lion doing the theme song and everything, and I loved it. It was super, super good, and I grew up with Optimus is, of course, in all of them, but to me, I didn't know Bumblebee. I knew he was hot. I think it's called Hot Shot. He was essentially Bumblebee. Hot Shot, Red Alert, But my favorite one was always a character named Sideways, who was a Decepticon motorcycle. He was legit. When I watched the other ones, my favorite one became Sideswipe because Sideswipe was legit too. So when I heard they were doing a Transformers movie, I was like ecstatic, but like very reserved still because I was in movies quite a bit, and I had just watched the 1980s one, so I was kind of still into it, not as hard as I was when I was a kid. But when I heard they were coming out with it and it was going to be serious and blah, 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 I was like, okay, cool. And I went and watched it, and it was the first one, so it wasn't super bad.
Right, the first one's not the worst movie ever. It's
like,
not amazing.
Yeah, it's not good. It's got its parts where it's really stupid and it's really bad, and it shows Michael Bay's, age because he's 5 years old still. And it's like racist at times, and it's like really uncomfortable at times.
Yeah, but the first one's not. I mean, this is no excuse, but like the first one is, I think, a watchable experience.
Like if it was just this and they never made another one, I think it would be better. Like I think we'd look back on it with a better opinion, But now we have Revenge of the Fallen and
Dark of the
Moon and
whatever the fourth one was.
Transformers 4 Age of
Extinction?
Dinosaurs.
Age of Dinosaurs. Age of the extinct dinosaurs before time.
And they get worse. Like 2 is worse than 3, yeah. But I personally think 4 is worse than 2.
Ugh.
Like it's close. 2 is
2 has way more like racism.
I saw 2 is incredibly racist. That's why they cut them in 3. Like they're gone. I saw 2 at a midnight release. It was sold out. I remember me and my friend Major, who we'll talk about later on in the podcast because he does the intro and outro. We were leaving the theater, and I just remember us hanging out our windows. It wasn't even our windows. It was some guy driving us. We were hanging out his windows going, fuck this movie. And all the people were like walking like, oh, shut up, the movie was great. And we're like, no, it wasn't. It was terrible.
Right. So, yeah, there's the Transformers movies. And again, ultimately, the original cartoon was designed to sell toys. Like, we all know this.
Right, but it's still like...
They had personality.
Yeah, Optimus was the leader. He was strong and he was brash. And, when he dies in that cartoon movie, it sucks. He dies in Armada as well, and it sucks when he dies.
Right.
Like, it hurts.
Yeah.
He dies in every goddamn Transformers movie now. He's contractually obligated to die in each movie, and it means nothing anymore.
He's also got to talk about honor.
Right. Well, and now he's a violent murderer. Where
in the fourth
in Transformers
movie,
4, he's like, I'm going to kill you.
Let's murder all of them.
Right. When I find him, I'm going to kill him.
Right.
Thank you, Optimus.
And it's a big problem. In the fourth movie, I mean, the movie's not good, but at least in the fourth movie, they give some of the other Transformers like personalities.
Yeah.
Even though they're like very, very one note.
We've got John Goodman as like a fat
right. There's like the military Southern guy. Then there's like the
Ken
samurai.
The samurai, and that's better. Although like in the first one, they kind of try to do it too, because the first one they had Jazz, who was the racist black guy. Ratchet was just Ratchet. Jeez, I can't remember the big guy.
It doesn't matter.
Big guy, whatever.
It doesn't matter.
But they kind of tried it in the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Second one, the personalities were, I'm racist.
And I'm Optimus. That's it.
I'm racist and That's good. That's good. I'm racist and I'm Optimus.
Oh, so the movies, they're not really scripts. They're not really screenplays.
No. They're
just a bunch of big, dumb, stupid explosions and buildings falling down, which my favorite things in movies.
I love, again, I'm going to reference another group's comment, but I love Red Letter Media reviewed Dark Side of the Moon, and they made a joke about how the screenplay must look for these movies. And it's literally Sam, Optimus! 7 pages of action. Optimus, Sam, get down. 20 more pages of action, and that's what these are. And the cartoons had a lot of action too, and they were violent, and there was explosions, and people got hurt.
At least they had plots,
and you cared. And there was at the beginning, they would talk, and there would be emotions, and there'd be friendships, and Starscream was a total asshole.
Right, you gave a shit.
Right, and Hotshot or Bumblebee, whichever one you're watching, he's gonna be the leader eventually, and Red Alert is hard on Hotshot because Red Alert's an uptight asshole. And
again, so to quote my good friend Seth, the source material isn't Shakespeare.
No.
It's not like Transformers was this grandiose, huge story with these completely complex and compelling characters.
Yeah.
But they had personalities.
Yeah, and it was still good enough to hold our attention.
Yeah, it's kind of like I think a really good example of this is the original Ninja Turtles movie from 1990, where you've taken this cartoon and this comic book that was basically around to sell toys, but you made it into something that had a personality. Like each of the turtles had their own individual personalities, and like the film was kind of dark and it was kind of edgy, even for like, especially for a kids movie. Like the movie had something to say and it had a little bit of edge to it, and the movie had personality.
Right, and that's just something that
Transformers movies do not have that whatsoever.
They completely misunderstand what the word personality means, and that's the biggest misstep.
I don't even know if they just misunderstand what it means so much as they're unaware of the term.
Yeah. Plus, how can you tell which Decepticon is which?
Right. It's
They're
just
all the same gray metal.
It's 2 hours of a bunch of gray and brown on the screen.
Right, except there'll be like Bumblebee's yellow. And Optimus is red and blue. So you can see them fine.
And he's dead.
At
least
always,
until the last 15 minutes.
He's always on the ground going, Sam, get to cover.
Or Mark Wahlberg.
Right. Kane? No.
Nope, doesn't matter. Mark Wahlberg.
Mark Wahlberg. Marky Mark.
So do you have anything else to say about Transformers?
No, I fucking hate these movies.
All right, moving on. So changing gears to something...
Gears, I like it.
Yeah. You get that?
Yep.
It's like I was going to make a joke and then just it didn't happen.
Gears and bats.
Anyway, so changing gears to something that people are going to be a little bit more familiar with. That's not true.
Nope. Transformers is better than Batman.
So I'm going to talk about Batman Begins. I really like Batman Begins. I
do too.
I think The Dark Knight's a better movie, but that's not what I'm going to talk about today. So essentially Batman Begins takes 3 Batman storylines, 3 comics.
Right.
Year One, Frank Miller's Year One, which everybody knows Year One. The Long Halloween,
which is amazing.
I think in our consensus, our favorite Batman comic.
Yes.
Okay.
Because it if you haven't read it yet, you need to read it.
Yeah.
It completely takes him out of the hero aspect and throws him into the detective aspect.
Yes, that's what I really love about Long Halloween. Like, it very much focuses on the detective side of Batman.
Yeah.
And then The Man Who Falls, which is essentially the Bruce Wayne origin story before he becomes Batman, like leading up to when he becomes Batman. So, Year One, Batman's first year back to Gotham City when he first becomes Batman after all of his training. Frank Miller, like, very famous comic book, probably the #1 Batman story.
Next to Returns.
The Dark Knight Returns, like the 2 most recognizable Batman comics. Then you have The Long Halloween, which is this year-long storyline where Batman is trying to solve this serial killer case, essentially.
Right.
And there's 13 issues of the series, and each issue is a month of time. So it starts on Halloween and it ends at Halloween of the following year.
Right.
Great story. Love that comic. And then The Man Who Falls, which tells the story of Bruce Wayne from when he's 14 years old and leaves Gotham City, and how he hops around the world, learning all these different skills from detectives and magicians and escape artists and all sorts of things. The FBI, that sort of thing. So Batman Begins, obviously, if you've seen the movie, takes these elements and kind of puts them all together. The Long Halloween, not so much the serial killer aspect, but The Long Halloween very much centers on the Falcone crime family, so which is heavily played on.
Which is, I think it's the first time they talk about the Falcones at all in cinematic form.
Yeah, in the cinematic universe, most definitely, because the previous movies never really focused on like the mob or the organized crime in Gotham City.
They just jumped straight into the masked villains.
Right, absolutely. So Batman Begins takes those 3 stories, those 3 comics, and kind of mixes them up and produces a screenplay. And in addition to taking those 3 storylines, it also incorporates, like the dark visuals that really support Batman and the production design, kind of
very gothic looking city.
Yeah, but taking inspiration from like the real world, like very much kind of centered around Chicago, especially in The Dark Knight. But a little bit in Batman Begins.
Yeah, and I will say it is kind of strange, but I do think Gotham looks very different between the 2.
Definitely. In the first movie, in Batman Begins, it definitely has more of like a, I don't want to say like comic booky, but it definitely has...
It does look like it's ripped right from it, though.
Yeah, it has more of like a design to it, whereas in The Dark Knight, it's strictly like, it's the city of Chicago.
Yeah.
So...
And Detroit.
Right. So Batman Begins, I think, is a... is a really good. So Batman Begins is this really good version of adapting comics to film because it takes these really interesting aspects of Batman's character and then tries to shape those into Batman being a three-dimensional, quote-unquote, grounded person. Like, as realistic as you could make Batman, the film attempts to do that, and it spends a long time establishing who Bruce Wayne is, leading up to him becoming Batman, like with his training with Ra's al Ghul, Henry Ducard in the movie. And it amalgamates a lot of things. It kind of puts everything together.
You mean Ra's al Ghul?
Right. They pronounce it incorrectly in the movie, and that's a big pet peeve of mine.
Today.
It's Ra's al Ghul, not Ra's al Ghul.
I mean, they even make the joke in Batman Beyond when Terry meets Talia for the first time, and he goes, "Yeah, I read all about the Al Ghul family, you and Ra's al Ghul." And she's like, "Wow, I'm really impressed, Mr. McGinnis." But father's name was pronounced Ra's, not Raz.
Right. So that's a big thing. But anyway, not important.
Very important.
Very important. So it kind of amalgamates all of his experiences in The Man Who Falls into like one centralized training area with the League of Shadows in the movie, which I get it. Like you're amalgamating because you got 2 hours and 20 minutes or whatever to tell a story. Like you have to get through it. That's fine. And then
people want to see Batman. They don't want to see Bruce Wayne.
They also, go into Bruce's family a little bit, like specifically with his father. They don't really represent his mother, Martha Wayne, at all, but they go into a lot of detail about Thomas. And the guy who plays Thomas Wayne, he's in the movie for like 3 minutes, and he's awesome.
Yeah, he does really, really good.
In the scene with the alley and Joe Chill, like he steps in front of Martha, like he's
just
fantastic.
Like, it's all right.
Yes.
Calm down. Like he's like very much like he's totally calm in the situation.
His like 15 lines of dialogue like makes that scene. It's so good. But anyway, like that's just a really good example of they take these 3 storylines and these details from these 3 different comics and they incorporate them into a film in combination with like excellent set design and costume design and direction and a good screenplay, and like they take all these things, but they've adapted those comic book storylines into a very compelling film that centers around this amazing pop culture character.
Right.
And I think it's so crazy to me, and The Dark Knight continues this tradition, but it's crazy to me that Nolan set this blueprint for like, look, this is how you do it. And even like he even fails himself, I think, in the third movie. Like you and I both despise The Dark Knight Rises. Again, that's another episode. But it's crazy to me how Nolan, I don't want to say like perfected the formula, but like really took comic book movies to like this upper echelon, and we just still get so much garbage.
Yeah.
And I saw this, there was a tweet that I saw online the other day, and somebody basically said, it seems like the lesson they learned from Nolan is be dark and gritty instead of...
And that's the wrong lesson.
Right, instead of like hire good directors and good actors and write good screenplays.
Right, which I do think, I do think, and I know a lot of people are going to probably crucify me for saying this, I think that Marvel owes its success right now to Christopher Nolan. Because I feel like Batman Begins encouraged Iron Man to take its time and more so focus on the man in the suit than the superhero itself.
I kind of agree, because there's definitely a few years that separate that. I think that Batman Begins kind of set the formula of, look, you can develop the person like that becomes the superhero. It doesn't have to be all about the superhero.
Right.
Because if you go back to like the Burton movies,
it's all Batman.
Right. Like
Bruce Wayne's in it for maybe like 10, 15 seconds.
Right. Like Batman 89 definitely gives you a little bit of Bruce Wayne, but like Returns, Forever, and Batman and Robin, like Bruce Wayne might as well just not be a character.
No.
He's just not there. And there's obviously other comic book movies out there, from I think like the original Superman like kind of does a good idea.
50-50 between Clark and
Superman. Like, and not that those movies are great, but like this specific aspect, at least like the first movie, it handles it pretty well.
Right.
And it's just all these movies, going forward, Marvel's kind of adapted a little bit. Again, that's a conversation for another day, because you and I have some opinions on the Marvel movies.
Yep.
But it's like, look, this guy did it. You don't have to necessarily emulate exactly what he did, but take a lesson.
Learn from it.
Right. Take a lesson from this. Like, have a good screenplay, hire good actors, hire good directors, like hire people that know what they're doing and know the important things about adaptation.
Yeah.
It's just take the things that work, take the things that are compelling about the property that you've chosen to license, and combine that with good writing.
Right.
and make good stuff.
So kind of to wrap everything up, I was wanting to talk about a certain series. You were wanting to talk about a certain series, and the two are very, very close and tied to each other. And that is the J.R.R. Tolkien series I? Two series. Peter Jackson's...
Plural, multiple...
Peter Jackson's Eyes, series Eyes.
Cereals.
Lucky
Charms. Frosted Flakes.
20 minutes long. If only. Gosh, if only. That being the very widely renowned, everyone loves it, Lord of the Rings series, trilogy, and then the kind of openly despised Hobbit trilogy.
Right.
And I guess we'll go in chronological order from book instead of movie, so we'll start with the Hobbit trilogy.
Right, and I've only seen the first Hobbit movie, which I did not like, spoilers, as you're about to find out.
Yeah.
You've seen all three,
yeah,
but I'll do my best to contribute.
Okay, so The Hobbit is a 160-page book.
It's like 230
yeah, I was
pages.
lowballing it. It's not very long.
It's not.
It is. I think it's thinner than Fellowship, Two Towers, and Return of the King.
Yeah, it's shorter than all of them.
Yeah, it's 3 films. So what they had to do is they had to add some random shit in it and force a bunch of stuff in it,
Yep.
which is it's fine in most aspects. It's just this does feel incredibly shoehorned in.
Right. So the big idea is that they didn't have. You essentially have to adapt 230 some odd pages into
3 feature-length
9
films.
hours of film.
Right.
Which there's just the Hobbit. Just the Hobbit book itself, which I've read a million times, so this I can speak about.
Right.
It's not structured like a traditional narrative, like a traditional movie would be.
Right.
So it would be very hard to break into like a 3-act structure, like most movies traditionally are,
and like Lord of the Rings does in theirs too.
Yeah. Just all those books that Tolkien wrote are not they're just not structured like a typical story is. Like they have very long stretches where not a lot of action happens. And when you're making an action movie that's rated PG-13 and you're trying to get everybody to go see it, that's just not very supportive of that structure.
Right. So I guess we'll just jump right in then. The Hobbit tells the story of Bilbo Baggins, who is telling the story in like a third-person view. It's kind of like a come sit down, let me tell you the story of my adventure. Because
in the movie,
yeah, hobbits are not adventurous. They like to stay at home. They like to cook and eat and welcome over guests and go to parties and everything. Yeah. But it's very conservative, very closed.
Yeah, they're not adventuring people, and then
they're not adventurous people. Period.
Right, and then Bilbo Baggins gets wrapped up into this big old journey with these dwarves and this wizard Gandalf, and they're gonna go on this big journey. It's like this big kind of coming of age, quote unquote, thing for Bilbo, even though he's older. But it's his foray into the wider world.
Right, because he's half Took.
Yeah, we can't go into this much detail.
No. He's half Took, so he is a little adventurous.
He has a little bit of adventure in his blood,
right.
Yeah.
So the main goal is the head of the dwarfs, being Thorin Oakenshield, wants to go and reclaim the dwarf kingdom under the mountain.
The Lonely Mountain.
The Lonely Mountain, which was taken by a legendary dragon by the name of Smaug. Smaug. So they go on an adventure, and the book is amazing. Like, if you haven't read the book, it's pretty short. Go read it.
And it's definitely it's a children's fairy tale, essentially.
Yes.
Like, there's definitely some violence and some scary things in it, but overall, it's a book designed for like 10 to 15-year-olds to be able to read and enjoy.
Right.
And it's a children's story, and it's charming in the way that it's presented. Like, it's kind of comedic. Like, it's not a Song of Ice and Fire. Like, it's not this like hardcore fantasy. Exactly.
And it does bleed over into the movies as well. The dwarfs are very characteristic in the book. They are absolutely not characteristic in the movie. In fact, I dare anyone who has like seen the movie and not read the book, name 6 of the dwarfs. You won't be able to.
Right.
You'll get Thorin, and you'll get like Fili and maybe Keely, and that's it.
Right. And it's just, in the film, it's very hard to establish 13 different personalities.
Right.
And in the book, again, you have more time to do it, even though the book's only 236 pages long. But you do get a sense kind of like, these are who these characters are. You don't learn like the huge backstory behind each and every one of them.
Right.
But you get a sense of the group collective. Yeah.
Very much like we were talking with Transformers.
Exactly.
Even if it's a one-note character, it's a one-note character. We know who they are.
They have personality.
Right. So the first movie is, in my opinion, it's the middle ground. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. And when I went and saw it, I left with such a bitter taste in my mouth because I went in expecting The Hobbit, but what I got was half Hobbit, half new shit.
Yeah. So essentially, because they didn't have enough material to fill 3 films, what they did is they took like material that is outside of the book that is canon in the Tolkien universe in Middle Earth, but it's not part of that specific story. So like Gandalf goes off to like deal with the necromancer, and like that's hinted at in the book, but it's not. It's in the Silmarillion, which is like this companion piece.
Yeah.
They put a lot of that story into The Hobbit. Number 1, to fill time, and number 2, to connect it to the Lord of the Rings movies, which have already happened.
Right.
And while that's a problem because that supplemental material doesn't really tell the story at hand, and it's not woven into the movie very well, so it's very jarring.
It feels like a cutaway. Like they keep on cutting away to something else.
Right. So the other big problem that I think, at least the first movie has, and I'm sure it continues in the second 2, but you'll tell me, again, The Hobbit is a children's story.
Right.
Because we've already, and the Lord of the Rings books are not. Like the Lord of the Rings books are more along the lines of like A Song of Ice and Fire. Yeah. Like it's more mature. Like that's kind of a weird term, but it's things like it's more violent, and it's the tone and the themes are darker. It's just a more like adult story. And because they made the Lord of the Rings movies first, they feel like, okay, in the Hobbit movies, we have to make things a little darker to kind of suit the tone. But the Hobbit movies want to straddle the line between
children and adults.
Right. Like, okay, some things are scary.
Which I do have a huge problem with this as well.
Right. And then, but some things like the Goblin King, for instance,
the Goblin
Underground.
King sucks.
Terrible. Like, it's just way over the top.
He's super goofy. One of my biggest pet peeves that movies do is when a villain dies, don't make them choke and then die. That's one of my biggest pet peeves that they do all the time. It's like a horrible cliche. Gandalf, like, slices the Goblin King open, and the Goblin King's like, oh, that'll do. No. Like, it's not good.
Right. And you can, in the book, there's definitely some shifts in tone, but in a book you can, like, delineate chapters, and you can tell, things from different perspectives, and it's easier to kind of shape different differentiating tones throughout the story.
Right.
In the movie, everything has to conform to like a visual style, and that doesn't really work in the Hobbit films because they have to conform to the visuals of Lord of the Rings, the movies that came later, these like darker, grimmer visuals. They have to like kind of take that square tab and put it into the round hole or the round peg of a round slot, I guess, of all the different terms.
It's a wood block going in a wrong hole.
Essentially, they have to put a square peg in a round hole, and it just doesn't fit. And like when you're watching the movie, you feel that.
Oh, and don't worry, I'll get to that.
Go ahead.
So first movie, middle ground, it's whatever. Second movie actually improved quite a bit. However, the second movie does introduce an aspect of a side plot that I did not like at all. And that is the wood elf who kind of refuses to help the dwarves in The Hobbit. When they go and see him in the book, he also refuses to help them. He kidnaps them, like he captures them, throws them in jail cells, Bilbo helps them out, they leave. That's the end of him. Like, he helps in the Five Army War, but it's not a big part of it.
Right.
For some dumb reason, they felt the need to put Legolas in.
Right, because he was in the other movies.
Because he was in Lord of the Rings. He's the popular elf from Lord of the Rings. Then they brought in a woman who is kind of like Legolas's love interest, but it's kind of like you kind of feel like it's forced a little bit.
Yeah, they introduce a love triangle essentially.
Right, and it's horrible, and it's unnecessary, and it's garbage, and it appeals to one of the characters, Feely or Keely, I can't remember which one it is. They're the twins,
one
that
of
are
the
youngest,
dwarves, yeah.
And it's terrible, and that is incredibly distracting. I'm going to ignore that, but I am going to come back to that because there's a big thing with that too.
Okay.
The fight with Smaug, amazing. Everything with Smaug is fantastic. Then the movie cuts to the third one in a very like to be continued style, which is aggravating. The third movie is shit. Like, it is. After the first one, I was like, I don't want to see these movies anymore. Second one, I was like, okay, cool. They're kind of bringing it back up. Third one, no. third one was a crushing defeat.
Right, because the third one is just the Battle of the Five Armies,
and
like the big war.
It's CG shit for 2 hours.
Yeah, it's really rough. In the book, the Battle of the Five Armies is like a few pages.
Right, and don't get me wrong, I think that the book does it bad. I love the book, but I think the book does it really poorly.
Mm-hmm.
Bilbo essentially gets hit in the head. He's out like a light.
Right.
He wakes up, and they're like, spoiler. By the way, Thorin, Fili, and Kili are all dead.
Right. They get you get introduced to the aftermath of the battle, and Bilbo has a chance to talk to Thorin before he dies.
But not Fili or Kili, who we both kind of grow attached to in the book.
Right.
So the big thing that these movies do horribly, abysmally bad compared to the Lord of the Rings trilogy is their heavy focus on CGI is a big one. In Lord of the Rings, it's all makeup and it's all costumes except for certain things like the Nazguls and the dragons.
Right. There's definitely CG, but it's not. It's as much as possible they try to use like traditional makeup and effects and that sort of thing.
Right. So when we see these goblins and the orcs in the first one, in the second one they go back to costumes here and there. Third one they're back to CG. They look horrible. Like, they look terrible. I know they're not there. I know these dwarfs are talking to nothing. They're looking in space. It's horrible. Also, they tone down the violence significantly in the first one. Second one, again, goes back a little bit, but in the third one, it's back to jokey. It's back to funny. But the biggest thing for me that really pissed me off is I grew up loving the friendship between Gimli and Legolas. And the reason why I like it is because elves and dwarfs do not get along. Legolas in Fellowship does not like Gimli, and Gimli does not like Legolas. However, the Hobbit trilogy fucks that up because this shows that Legolas happily worked with Gimli's father. They were best of pals, shaking hands and pounding fists and having a grand old gay time. And then he just changed his mind in like the 20 years, 30 years later. Right. Like, what the hell? Like, it makes no sense in this. Don't put Legolas in.
Right, because they've already had the Lord of the Rings movies previously, which tells, part of the story that happens chronologically after the Hobbit movies.
Right.
You have this issue where you've already established who these characters are in the continuity further on down the line. So you kind of have to, like, retroactively fit traits that they shouldn't have into a past story.
Yeah, and Legolas just doesn't work.
Right.
It would make zero sense for him to be in the story.
It kind of goes back to our conversation on fan service where, hey, let's put Legolas in the movie because everybody loves Legolas.
Right.
But his presence in the movie detracts from the actual story because you have to do gymnastics to get him into the plot of this movie.
Right. And for those people who, are going to grow up now and they're going to see the Hobbit trilogy first and the Lord of the Rings trilogy second, I hope they don't do that, but if they do, that whole conflict, that whole friendship being grown between Legolas and Gimli is going to mean so much less than if it's two people that hate each other, that don't get along, become really good friends.
Yeah, you've kind of, again, in the Lord of the Rings movies, like you established that Legolas and Gimli are kind of at odds with each other, and then over these 3 films, they bond and they learn to overcome their differences and they become friends.
Right.
And that really doesn't have any weight to it if you've kind of established earlier in the chronology, like, oh, hey, but he was working with this dwarf, so I guess he just forgot how to be friendly.
He kind of started to hate them. Maybe a dwarf skipped out on the bill and he got really pissed.
Right. So they obviously, they wanted to make the 3 Hobbit movies because the Lord of the Rings movies years prior were very financially successful and critically acclaimed, and they were like...
And Peter Jackson wanted to eat more carrots on screen.
Yeah, well, he didn't want to do it, and then eventually he did do it, and so on and so forth. But it feels like when you watch the Lord of the Rings movies, you can just feel and see on the screen the care and the passion that went into this project. And when you watch, at least for me, the first Hobbit movie, that seems to be completely absent.
You're not watching an adventure anymore. You're watching CG cartoon animals.
Right. It seems like the same amount of effort wasn't put into those films. And again, you're trying to shoehorn a tone from the earlier movies into a story
that's more lighthearted.
That is more lighthearted and more charming, and the two just don't mesh very well together.
Right.
And that's why I think that the Hobbit movies, they just feel like a mess because the tone is not consistent. The characterizations are not consistent. You have in the first movie, Thorin and Bilbo kind of seeing each other eye to eye. And then in the second movie, they're reset. And then in the third movie, they're reset. Like, you don't have any consistency in the relationships with your characters like you do in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So you just have this big mess of stuff that isn't telling a consistent narrative.
Thank you, Aragorn, for doing the right thing and not showing up.
So briefly to wrap up, to contrast the Hobbit movies, we're going to talk about the Lord of the Rings films that came out years prior. And in my opinion, the Lord of the Rings movies are almost this kind of perfect way to adapt a series of books into a series of films.
Right. Every time this stuff kind of comes out, there's always the mix. There's always the people that are like, yeah, it's great. There's always people that say, no, it screwed this up, left this out. I didn't hear it with Lord of the Rings.
Right. I mean, Lord of the Rings was obviously this huge phenomenon, in 2001, 2002, and 2003 when the movies originally came out. And I think that the reason that I enjoyed them so much, and I had read the books prior to seeing the films several times, and they're some of my favorite books, and they continue to be some of my favorite books until this day. They were very inspirational to me in my love of fantasy and storytelling, and kind of a big part of shaping what I love about this kind of media. And the movies, they, again, take all of the elements from the books that are necessary to tell this particular story. They have these fantastical creatures, and they have these, elves and hobbits and dwarves, and they have, wizards, and they have political intrigue, and they have this dying world and this great enemy and these armies of darkness and all of these elements. But again, supplemented with that is this amazing costume design and this amazing production design and New Zealand, this great, scenery and how it's photographed just beautifully. And just down to when you're in the Shire at the very beginning of the first movie and you see Hobbiton and you see these hobbit holes built into the side of the hills. Like, these are real sets that people made. And it's so clear the passion and the love and the expertise that went into making these films, coupled with the things that work from the novels. The reason that these novels have been such a huge part of fantasy storytelling and popular culture and have just permeated themselves into, nerd culture and popular culture and storytelling in general. Like, there's a reason that people love these stories, and Peter Jackson and all the people behind those movies took what is so great about those stories and infused it with the love and care of filmmaking and made these three great movies. And they're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And you know what? They take things away from the books that they don't put in.
Stuff as well.
And they add a few things in here and there, but they keep the spirit and the soul of what made those novels great and infuse them into these absolutely fantastic films.
Right.
So we hope you've enjoyed our conversation on adaptation, transferring things from one medium to another.
Right. I hope so too. I did. How about you?
If you did enjoy it, let us know what your favorite examples of adaptations are, whether it's from comic books to film, or books to film, or film to video games. Or...
And I imagine we're going to, again, like we did with the kids movie one, we're going to probably do a couple more of these.
Yeah, we can definitely revisit this topic.
We could do comic book movies for a whole one. We could do video game movies for a whole one.
We decided on this topic, and then I kind of realized that I wasn't very prepared, so I came up with some things on the fly, but I'm sure I can think of more examples.
Yeah, easily.
Yeah. Things from, well, we'll get to that. So yeah, let us know what some of your favorite adaptations are from comics, movies, novels, video games, whatever.
Stone tablets.
Hieroglyphics.
Gods of Egypt.
Jamie Lannister.
Yep.
So let us know. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at POP RANT RADIO, and you can email us at poprantradio@gmail.com. Let us know what you guys think. Send us episode ideas, whatever you want.
Or your favorite ones. What are your least favorite ones?
What things do you absolutely hate about adaptation?
Is it ong or eng? Good luck trying to write that in an email.
As always, we'd like to thank Major for the theme songs.
Thank you, sir.
We said that we would.
Well, we were yelling at people about Transformers.
And we're doing it now.
Yep.
So, sorry we lumped you in with Transformers, Major.
That's not very good.
Do you have anything else you'd like to talk about today, sir?
Nope, I'm 100% good.
Awesome. So again, thanks for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and we will see you next week.
Bye, guys.